Hello, my name is Lila White, and I have the pleasure of sharing with you my project Denim Kintsugi Beauty Out of the Breakage. A little bit about me to start off. I'm a senior fashion design student here at Meredith, and even as a kid, I was fascinated by clothing construction. One of the first things I ever told my mom was, I want to make doll clothes when I grow up. Well, fast forward a couple years, even before college, I discovered this upcycling concept, which really intrigued me because it provides a perfect opportunity to creatively problem solve with items in my wardrobe to create something new and interesting. Going into the inspiration for this project, Japanese Kintsugi really jumped out at me. The idea of repairing broken things with something to make it more valuable than how it was before it was repaired, before it was broken, really, just really grabbed my attention. So going into the history of Kintsugi, it is believed to be initiated by the Japanese shogun Ashikaga Yoshimasa back in the late 15th century. He'd sent his favorite tea bowl to China to be repaired, but it came back full of metal staples, which was a traditional way of repairing, but it was not up to his standards, so he ordered a new way be found. Thus, Kintsugi. Now, going into the process of it, the glue used in Kintsugi is derived from the yuishi tree sap, and the actual application of it can be quite painstaking. There's, of course, the patching it together of all the different pieces, and it depends on the extent of the break. But then the gold is usually dusted on top of it. And this is effective because the lacquer actually cures by absorbing moisture. And this can take weeks, but it's perfect for Japan's humid climate. And of course, some of the symbolism is restoration and healing, broken things coming together and being whole. And not only being whole, but being beautiful and more beautiful maybe than it was before it was broken. And so that really emphasizes, the idea of not hiding imperfections necessarily, but instead trying to find the beauty, kind of like the silver lining, almost quite literally. One source, however, put it a different way, a very interesting way. The importance of the Kintsugi isn't the appearance, it's the beauty or importance which stays in the one who's looking at the dish. And so this kind of really caught my eye because I'm thinking, well, the beauty is what attracts me to it. But on the other hand, he's right, the value is really what's important here. So going into the next part of my inspiration, I picked denim. I actually knew that I wanted to work with denim to begin with and work with upcycling because this is just something that's very popular and also quite controversial nowadays. Just some stats and facts. The industry size is $63.5 billion in revenue, I believe, as of 2020, the year 2020. And then there are 2 billion jeans per year produced. I think that is also 2020 numbers. As for the development and manufacturing, up to 7,660 gallons of water are needed for 2.2 pounds of cotton. And this is just the fiber. And going along with that is the 16% of all insecticides used for crops and the 6.8% herbicides. This is pretty significant because it's quite toxic to the farmers and the lands. And to add on top of that, in the garment and the fabric treatment, there are harmful dyeing and finishing processes that have been known to pollute whole rivers in China, the main center of where jeans are made, as depicted in the pictures on the right. Some rivers have turned blue with the chemical waste from it. And so this presents a resource and pollution problem connected with denim production. And so kind of going into my approach, we have fast fashion, and that's quite a difficult problem because that has the social and environmental impacts, like I pointed out in the first slide or in the slide before. But some other trends that could maybe inform the way that we go about using what we already have, DIY. Upcycling is kind of like a derivative off of that, the clothing derivative, but using older materials, things that are devalued in a sense by the previous owner. So just going into DIY, it's become increasingly popular with the rise of internet and social media, because now we can see what people are doing and kind of learn through that visual aid. And the global e-commerce revenue of the DIY industry is $413.5 billion. That's pretty significant. Now you might be wondering why I have couture on there, because they're kind of opposites. DIY is, generally connected with amateur, whereas couture is generally connected with very professional, fine craftsmanship and all that. But I really wanted to kind of meld the two together in this project to really demonstrate how you could get something of a higher value through restoring imperfect or rejected clothing. And just a note here, the couture industry itself is actually shifting to like less formal or extravagant and kind of into more versatile clothing. And I think this is really important because I feel like this process could be applied and kind of maybe bring some, bring not fast fashion, but more mass marketed, mass produced things up to couture level. So going into the process, you see my sketches with my coordinating inspiration pictures. And of course, I used draping, which then got transferred to a paper pattern, which then got adjusted through muslin fittings and such. Now, the really interesting thing that I had to figure out here was how do I get the gold seaming that I wanted? Very much like Kintsugi, where it's like almost one. How do I get that? So what I did was I took bias strips, folded them in half, and then sewed the strips into the seams with the folded edge to the right side. And then that folded edge would get top stitched down so that it would make it seem like one thing rather than something sticking out of the seam. Going into the fabrication side of it, I literally had to take these jeans, cut off all of the seams down at the bottom, the inseam, side seam, all of that, and basically just cut away the pant leg from the waist and from the zipper and all that. And then I would lay my my piece patterns on top and have to figure out the best layout to make sure I got all the fabric I needed. And of course, what's left? Just the waist and the pockets, essentially. For garment one, I went with a dress, and I wanted it to be, very, very much kind of like, maybe not clubbing, but more fancy evening wear or formal wear, really. And yet very unique as well. And so you see over there on the left, I actually had to designate where the gold seams were going to be, because not every seam that I used for the piecing was going to be used for the gold seaming. And over here, you see a picture of me. You see all the picture of all of the pieces already sewn together, and the only thing that's left is sewing all the gold seams. And down below, there are the gold seams, most of them, not quite everything. Over on the far right, you see some inner construction pictures. I decided to line this one with a back zipper. For garment two, I went with a jumpsuit because I was really inspired by the idea of kind of using that front placket like you see on jeans. I ended up using a railroad zipper instead, but I very much wanted it to kind of have that look, almost like I could take the waist of pants and translate it into this design. And this one had fewer gold seaming lines, so that wasn't as much the focus, but very much still the piecing. And here are the results, some modeling pictures, kind of how you would wear them. I was figuring maybe the dress on the left would be for clubbing, or maybe for a fancy dinner, maybe even a wedding outfit, I don't know. Just something that's a little bit more formal and fancy. And then on the right, the jumpsuit is more something I would do for still a nice occasion. You know, you might still want to dress up maybe for going to the mall or, you know, a special event, but not as formal. And then here are my citations. Thank you so much for listening.